Welcome to the Tuck Shop Tales. I'm not sure if that's working all right, so just hope we're all live. And yes, welcome to the Tuck Shop Tales. My name is Heather Yule, and I am delighted to be here this morning to share some stories with you. Now, I know that we're all getting so used to these online events, and so there's the chat function there. So if anyone wants to say where they're from and introduce themselves to each other, just so that we feel a bit more connected, that we know that everyone's out there. Because even though we're scattered all over the country and all around the world, it's amazing. We're in this online world where we're all together here in the Tuck Shop at the same time. And I know that you're out there and I am in here, but I'm hoping that you will help me with the stories this morning, because it makes it much more fun if you join in. And, if you might have instruments in the house or things that make interesting noises, and so you could improvise along with the stories and make up sound effects and what have you. Or just even join in with the repeated phrases and the animal sounds and the actions. I have with me my harp. And in Scotland, we often call it a clarsach, which is the Gaelic word for harp. And there is lots of sounds effects that sometimes I use with my stories. I can play nice tunes and do all that kind of thing, but you can also do things. So for example, I can make sounds like dolphins or whales singing, or bees buzzing, little insects. Or I can do this kind of thing. Or little delicate sounds. Yeah. My first story, before I tell you my first story though, last week Claire McNichol was doing the Tuck Shop Tales, and she started off her session with a riddle. And I love riddles. So I'm going to tell you a riddle, but I'm not going to tell you the answer right away. I want you to have a think about it and see if you can guess this riddle. And the riddle goes, what has a mouth but never speaks? It runs, but it has no legs. It has a bed, but it never sleeps. And it's always rich. I'll tell you that again. Some of you might know this already, but it's a good old-fashioned riddle. So, what has a mouth but never speaks? It runs, but it has no legs. It has a bed, but it never sleeps. And it's always rich. So we'll sort that out later on in the story. So, my first story now, just heads up with this, is that there's a horse galloping at one point in it, so you could maybe think of a noise that you can make while the horse is galloping to make that sound. You could just use your hands on your legs, on your knees, make a sort of thundering, galloping sound, or your fingers on a tabletop. I'm not very good at that. Maybe you are. So, there was a farmer, and he was riding home very late one night on his horse. And it had been a very, very long day. And he was tired and he was hungry. He couldn't wait to get home. But he had to admit it was a beautiful night for being out and about, because it was dry and clear and it wasn't very cold. And there above him was this incredible, magnificent moon, full moon. The moonlight shining down was making everything look all shimmery and mysterious and beautiful. Well, about 3 miles from his house, the road took a wee dip into a forest and then back out the other side. And when they entered the forest, it was very dark, very dense forest it was, and so it was almost pitch black in there. But the horse knew the road well, so it just kept on trotting along happily at the same pace. But as they were coming through the forest, what should happen? But something leapt out and grabbed hold of the horse's tail. And the horse got such a fright. His ears went back, his eyes went wild, and started to gallop along the road. And it was galloping along, and the farmer nearly fell off. He grabbed hold with both hands at the mane and hung on for dear life. He didn't know what was going on. Then he realised he could hear a very strange noise coming from behind him. It sort of went, whirr, whirr, bump, whirr, whirr, bump. And he just didn't know what was going on, and he could hear this kind of squealing and giggling sound. Well, the horse came through out of the forest into the open road again, and there was the moon shining brightly, and it was clear and easy to see, and the farmer kind of scrunched round in his seat, still hanging on to that mane, to look to behind, and he saw the strangest thing, because there was some sort of thing, some sort of creature hanging on to the horse's tail, and it was flying up into the air and then landing with a thump on the ground, and then flying back up again and landing with a thump on the ground. It was going whurra whurra whurra, and it was obviously having a great time. It was laughing and giggling away and squealing away. Well, the farmer's hanging on tight with one hand. He let go of the other hand and he reached back and he grabbed hold of that creature when it was flying up in the air. He grabbed hold of it and he pulled it behind him onto the horse. Well, this thing was wriggling and it was still squealing, but now it was howling. But he hung on tight. He had a sort of fistful of fur. Well, because of getting that creature off of the tail, the horse began to calm down and it started to go slower. And by the time they got to the farmhouse, it came to a complete stop outside the door. The farmer got off the horse, still hanging on to this wriggling thing, and he had finally a good look at it. I didn't know what to make of it. It was just like a ball of fur. He couldn't even tell where its eyes were. I could see its mouth because it was wide open and it was squealing and howling and carrying on. And he thought, my goodness me, I've caught a baby monster. What am I going to do with it? He didn't dare let it go in the farm because, if it caused that much trouble to his poor horse, what would it do to the other animals on the farm? It was obviously full of mischief. But maybe he really needed to take it back to the forest, but he couldn't do that tonight. No, he had to put it somewhere until the morning. The box room, he thought. It was perfect. Up the stairs, he had this wee room, and there was a tiny window, but it was too small for the baby monster to escape from, and it had a good strong door. So he went upstairs, put the baby monster in the box room, closed the door and locked the door. You could still hear it howling away, but he went downstairs and he took the horse to the stables and made sure it was okay. The poor thing was still shivering after its experience, and he calmed it down, and then he went back into the house. Now, by this point, he was absolutely exhausted. They didn't have the energy to light the fire or do anything. He did get himself a cup of tea and a wee plate of food. They sat down at the kitchen table and had his wee supper by one candlelight. And he was sitting there and he was eating away when all of a sudden there came a voice. A big, loud voice from outside. Farmer! Farmer! He leapt out of his chair, he ran over to the window and he peeked out through the shutters. And what did he see but outside the farmhouse was a great, big, furry monster. I mean, it was huge. And as he watched, this creature shouted out, Farmer! My hair is wet and my heart is wild. Return to me, my bonny child, or your house I will pull apart stone by stone, and to the four winds they will be thrown. Oh, the farmer was absolutely terrified. But then he thought about this and he thought, well, no, this is maybe a good thing, because if I give her back her child, maybe she'll just go away, leave me alone, and then my problem is solved. I won't have to worry about what to do with the baby monster. So he ran upstairs, he opened up the box room, grabbed the furry creature, it was wriggling and shrieking, and he took it down the stairs. He opened up the front door and he pushed it out the door and shouted, "There's your bairn, there's your child." He slammed the door, locked it, and ran back into the kitchen and peered through the shutters. And he saw the baby monster running towards the big monster, shouting, "Mama, Mama!" And the mother monster grabbed her wee one into her arms and said, "Oh, my bonny bairn." And there was lots of cuddles and kisses. And then they turned and they started to walk away. And the mother monster was speaking away to her child. Now, she maybe thought she was whispering, but her voice was so loud that the farmer could hear every single word. "Oh, my bonny, bonny bairn," she said, "I hope you've not been blabbing and telling secrets to that farmer." "No, Mama, no. I just squealed and howled. I just squealed and howled the whole time, I promise." "So you've not been telling him things like about that treasure that's buried under his fireplace?" "No, Mama, no, I promise I just squealed and howled." "Ah, well, that's fine then," she said. And she kept on walking. And she walked on, and the farmer watched as they disappeared into the darkness, and they were gone. Wow. The next morning, very early, the farmer got up and he rushed and got himself a pick and a shovel and he tore apart that fireplace. And what do you know? Under the fireplace was a great big a chest. When he opened it, it was filled with gold and silver coins. The farmer now was a very wealthy man, and he was able to look after his farm and his livestock very well, and he lived a long, happy life. Now, he never saw those monsters again, but he always blessed the day when he had rode through that forest and the baby monster had jumped out and gone, "What a And so that's a wee story for you. And now, I don't know, maybe some people have only just been joining us, so I'm going to tell you that riddle again. I'm still not going to give you an answer to it. What has a mouth but never speaks? It runs but it has no legs. It has a bed but it never sleeps, and it's always rich. So my next story, now I'll ask you a question about this. What kind of animals do you find on a farm? So I want you to have a think, and if you've got any suggestions, you can put it in the chat. Now, this story takes place up in the northwest of Scotland, up high in the northwest coast. And there was a wee laddie called Tam. And Tam lived with his family in a croft. Now, some of you might not know what a croft is. A croft is like a wee farm, like a tiny farm. It's just a bit of land that you might have beside your house, and you would grow crops and enough for yourself, and maybe things a wee bit more to sell at the market so that you could get money to buy necessities and buy more seeds and things for the croft. And you might have some animals. So I don't know whether anyone's got any animals. No animals there. Okay, well, I'll suggest some. And there's things like you might have a few sheep. That's good to have the wool, knit your jumpers and things. And of course they go ba, ba. And there might be a goat. Ma, ma. It's good for milk. There's a goat. And chickens. Can't forget the chickens. Got to have your eggs. And so they were going running about the farm, the croft. And you might have a cow. Ooh. And cows. Oh, the cow. Oh, and another thing about the story, besides joining in with the sound effects and maybe improvising along with instruments, maybe those of you who are good at drawing, this is a great story for illustrating. So you might get out your pens and paper and draw along or draw later on, think about. But this is a great story for that kind of thing, for making nice artwork. So Tam on his croft, they had a cow. And this was a very special cow, because this cow, and her name was Bruni, was a magic cow. Because you see, she could talk, she could sing, she could dance, and she gave the most amazing milk. It was thick and creamy and beautiful. And every day she gave them about 10 to 20 litres of milk. I mean, incredible amount of milk. And when they had done all sorts of making cheese and butter and what have you on the croft, Tam's mother would take the milk and give it out to share it around all the folk in the glen, all the villagers here and there, everywhere. And so Tam and his cow were well loved throughout the community. Now, Tam and Bruni were the best of friends, and every morning after Tam had breakfast, he would rush off to the byre to say good morning to Bruni. And he would also, during the day, if he wasn't at school, he would spend a lot of time with her. If he was at school, as soon as he got back, he'd rush to find her. And then last thing at night, he always went to speak to Bruni, and she would sing him a lullaby. And that's how they got on. Now, one morning, Tam came down the stairs and for breakfast and sat down, and he ate his porridge up, and then he rushed out the door. Of course, where was he going? He was going to the byre to say good morning to Bruni. But when he went into the byre, she wasn't there. He ran outside. He looked for her everywhere, but there was no sign of Bruni. Well, he ran back in the house. He said, "Mom, Dad, Bruni's disappeared." His mother said, "Oh, don't be daft. She's probably just gone out for early morning walk up in the meadow that she likes to graze in." He said, No, she's no there. I've looked." His father said, "Well, if you look down by the shore, she likes to have a wander along the beach sometime." "I've looked," said Tam, "she's no there." Well, everyone started to worry, and the whole household went out to look for her, and soon the whole of the village were out looking for Bruni. But there wasn't a trace of her to be found, not even a hoof print. It was like she had just vanished. She'd gone, just like that. Well, Tam was really upset, and he said, "No, I've got to go out and search for her. She could be in trouble. I need to go and find her." And he was determined, and there was no dissuading him otherwise. So his mother made him a bannock and a few other things. She gathered that together and gave him that to take with him in case he got hungry. And off he went. And he went up the hills, and he went down into the valleys and along the river banks. And then he stopped and he shouted, "Bruni! Bruni, where are you?" And then he listened. He listened. And what do you know? Way off in the distance, he heard the sound. Moo. It was Bruni. He recognised her voice. Oh, it was Bruni. And he started to run as fast as he could up over the hills and down into the valleys and along the riverbanks. And then he stopped and he shouted again, "Bruni, Bruni, where are you?" And he listened again. And this time louder, he heard, "Boo!" Oh, it's definitely Bruni, definitely. And so he ran up and down over the hills and down the valleys, along the river's banks. And he came up to this high little hill, and he stood there and he shouted again, "Bruni, Bruni, where are you?" And he listened. And this time there was a great big "Boo!" And he looked all around, but he couldn't see her. And then he realised that the sound was coming from beneath his feet. He ran down the hill and he ran round it. And what do you know? There was a cave. And he went into the cave, and there was Bruni. She was tied to the wall. She had a rope round her neck, and there was an iron ring in the wall of the cave. And there she was tied, and he untied her quick, and he said, "Oh, Bruni, oh, so brilliant, I found you. What happened?" And she said, "Oh, I was kidnapped by the big and the wee giant of the north. They took me away, and they tied me up in this cave." "Oh," said Tam, "well, we better hurry and try and get home before they discover that you are gone." And so out the cave they went, and they headed back down the road towards home. But they hadn't gotten far when the ground started to roar and shake. Tam looked behind them, and what did he see? But there in the distance was the great giant, the big giant and the wee giant of the north coming. And both these giants were huge, just the big giant was even bigger than the wee giant. But they were both big giants, and they were striding out across the land towards Tam and Bruni. And Tam knew that they'd catch them really quickly, and he said to Bruni, "What are we going to do?" Bruni said, "Don't worry, Tam. Just take a hair from my ear and throw it on the road." So Tam plucked a hair from Bruni's ear and threw it on the road. And Bruni said, "Hair of my ear, turn into a river so wide and so deep and so fast that none can cross it except for a bird on wing." Well, that hair burst open, and water droplets started to come out, and then a wee sprinkle, and then a fountain, and then it was a waterfall, and then a flood, and there on the land was a great big river. It was so long, so wide, so deep, and so fast that none could cross it except for a bird on a wing. Well, when the giants got to the river, they couldn't get across. That big giant, oh, he was mad. He was so angry. He said, "Oh, I've got to get that cow." He thought for a while. He said, looked at the wee giant, and he said, "I've got it. You go home and bring back the giant ox." So the wee giant rushed home. They got the giant ox, and he ran back again. And they put the ox beside the river, and the ox began to drink, and it went and it drank, and it drank, and it drank, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it was like a balloon. Great big ox, so swollen up with the river. There was only just a kind of puddle at the bottom of the river, and the giants could stride across. Well, Tam and Bruni were getting on fine, but then, of course, the ground began to shake once more. And Tam looked back, and there in the distance were the giants. Bruni, what are we going to do?" But he said, "Don't worry, Tam. Just take a hair, pluck a hair from my back and throw it on the ground." So Tam plucked a hair from Bruni's back and threw it on the ground. And Bruni said, "Hair from my back, turn into a fire so high and so wide and so hot that none can cross it except for a bird on wing." Well, that hair split open, and little sparks came out at first, and then flames started to shoot up higher and higher and higher into the sky, until there was a great huge fire blazing and roaring, and it was so hot you couldn't even get close to it with the smoke and the heat, and none could cross except for a bird on wing. But when the giants got to the fire, they couldn't even get close. The big giant, oh, he was mad. He was furious. I thought for a while, and then he turned to the wee giant and said, "You go back home, bring back that ox now." Well, the wee giant rushed home, grabbed the giant ox and rushed back again, and the giant ox was still like a big balloon full of water. And I think you can guess what they did. They started to tickle the ox, and they tickled and they tickled and they tickled, and the ox started to go, and water started to spout out of the ox more and more and more and more more until there was just not just a stream, but an absolute flood of water coming out of the ox. And before you know it, that fire was dead. It was out, just smoking ash. And the giants could cross. Well, Tam and Bruni were getting quite close to home now. But then the ground started to shake. And Tam looked back, and there were the giants coming once more. Well, what we're going to do, Bruni? Don't worry, Tam. Just pluck a hair from my tail and throw it on the ground. So Tam plucked a hair from her tail and threw it on the ground. And she said, "Hair of my tail, turn into a mountain range, so high and so wide, and so long and so steep that none can cross it except a bird on a wing." Wow. That hair split open, and these rocks started to grow up out of it. Up higher and higher and higher they went, and wider, until there was this most amazing mountain range. It was long and stretched for miles, and it was wide and it was steep. It was like glass. None could cross it except for a bird on a wing. Oh, when the giants got to the mountain range, oh, that big giant, he was absolutely raging. It's like, I've got to get that cow. How am I going to get past this mountain? And he thought, he said, I know, you. He said to the little giant, off you go home and bring back the giant drill. Well, the wee giant ran home, oh, it's a long way now. He ran all the way home, grabbed the giant drill and ran all the way back. And the big giant took that drill and he started to drill a hole in the mountain. He went, and he drilled 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 until he made it right the way through to the other side of the mountain. Well, he put his eye up to the hole and he looked and he looked and he looked. And sure enough, there in the distance he saw Tam and Bruni running away. He thought, oh, I'm going to get that cow yet. And he was so excited, so focused on the cow, that he forgot a very important thing. He forgot to check how wide the tunnel was through the mountain. Well, it was fine at first. He was crawling through and he crawled through and he crawled through and he got to the point where his nose was sticking out the other side of the mountain. And then you know what? He got stuck. He couldn't move forward. He couldn't move back. He was absolutely stuck with his nose only at the other end and his feet hanging out the other side. They couldn't move. Well, he roared and he shouted and the wee giant heard him, and the wee giant tried his best. He really did. He took hold of the other giant's feet and he pushed and he pushed and he pushed. It didn't work. He pulled and he pulled. It didn't work. And then after a while, the wee giant was thinking to himself, you know, it's quite nice here, sitting here at the mountain, not being bossed around by that big giant. Maybe I'll just leave him there. And so that's what he did. He just left Big Giant in the mountain and headed for home. And that giant is still trapped in that mountain. I think he's turned to stone now. But if you're ever up a mountain and you see a great big nose sticking out, go round to the other side of the mountain because you might see the feet hanging out the other side. But as for Tam and Bruni, well, they made it home. And Tam was able to sing his lullaby to Tam that night. Now, before I've got one tiny little last story for you, your third story. But before that, let's see if we've got the riddle. I don't know if anyone has posted anything about the riddle. No, I don't think so. So I'll say the riddle one more time and then I'll tell you the answer. What has a mouth but never speaks? It runs but it has no legs. It has a bed but it never sleeps, and it's always rich. And the answer is a river. Because of course a river has a mouth that goes into the sea or into a loch, but it doesn't speak to you, in words anyways. And it runs along, but it doesn't have any legs. And it has a bed, but it doesn't sleep. And the last one, oh, it's a bit of a silly answer, this, but why is it always rich? Because it has a bank on either side of it. So that's why, the answer to that riddle. So my last wee story, now this story is actually about that giant, because you know, you've got Tam and Bruni and made it back home safe and sound. But what about that giant? He was, as I say, he was a big giant. He just was smaller than the other one. And he really liked, after years of being pestered and nagged and bossed around, his favourite thing was peace and quiet. He loved being places where he could hear the sound of the birds singing. And maybe he quite liked the sea. He liked being by the sea and hearing the sound of the waves crashing on the shore. And so he was desperate to find a peaceful, quiet place. And he headed north, further away from folk. But the first place he went to after the mainland of Scotland was the Orkney Islands. But there were other giants there. There were far too many giants and trows and brunies and all sorts of magical creatures, and it was just too crowded, besides all the people as well. But he just couldn't stand it, so he headed even further north. And he ended up in Shetland, which of course the Shetland Islands are the most northerly place in Scotland. And he eventually found himself the perfect place. He was in a beautiful little secluded place where he could hear and listen to the birds all day long. And there below him was the sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs. And everything was perfect. Perfect, that is, until after a few years, what should happen? But a bunch of trows moved in. Now, not just a bunch. This was a family. And when I mean a family of trows, I mean like a whole clan of trows. I mean, there were hundreds of them. And they were just made so much noise. Because trows loved to party. So every single night, out would come the fiddles and music would start. They'd be dancing. And they were having the best time. They were having a fantastic time. But they spent all night dancing and singing and laughing and carrying on. And the poor giant would be lying in his bed with his hands over his ears. Oh, just in agony. He just wanted peace and quiet. He begged the trows. He said he'd find them another home somewhere. No, they liked it there. They had perfect hills to make trowy homes, and they weren't afraid of him. Trows aren't afraid of giants, and you know, he couldn't do anything to try and get rid of them. And eventually he decided that he had to make a plan. And he came up with a fantastic plan. He decided that he was going to make a creel, which is like a basket. He would make a creel, and he'd big enough to put all the trows, and then he would take that creel over to Norway, and he'd leave the trows there because they couldn't swim back across the sea, but he could just kind of wade through the sea and take them to Norway. And so he thought that was just perfect. So he started to weave the straw together to make a creel. And he made this great big creel, and he put it looked a bit like a rucksack or something, because he had these straps so that he could put it on his back so he could carry the trows across the sea to Norway. So he made this, and did a fantastic job. And then he waited until one night, and the Trows were having, just as usual, they were out dancing and having a great time on the hill. And he went round and he started to scoop them up by handfuls into his creel. And he got them all in. And oh, they were struggling and shrieking at him and saying, let me out, let me out. They're punching and kicking from inside the creel, but they couldn't get out. And they were so pleased. He got them all, every single one of them, into this creel. But then he tried to pick it up, and it was too heavy. It was so weighted down with all those Trows. What am I going to do? He thought. Then he had another idea. He thought, right, there's that hill there, that wee hill, and there's a gorge on the other side of it. I'll drag it up to the top of the hill, and then I'll go round to the gorge, and I'll just sort of hunker down. I'll get the straps onto my back, and then I'll be able to sort of lift the creel up onto my back when I get up to my full height. Perfect. So that's what he did. He started to drag that creel across the ground up the hill. But of course, the ground was rough. There were stones, there was bracken, there was heather, and it started to wear away at the straw at the bottom of the creel. Now, the giant didn't realise this. And he got the creel to the top of the hill, and he left it there, and then he went round to the gorge. And he sort of hunkered down, he sort of knelt down a bit, got his arms into the straps, and then he stood up. And when he stood up, the weight of all those Trows, the bottom broke and burst open, and all the Trows just scattered. They went everywhere, just right round the hill, and they were shouting and laughing and jumping around. The giant, when that creel exploded, the giant was thrown forward, and to save himself, he put one knee forward and then one foot, and he landed with such a thump that he made huge impressions in the ground. And so when you go to that place, you can see them, because his knee made such a hole between two hills that to this day it's called Knee Fell. And as for his foot, that hole in the ground there, his footprint, is now a loch, better water, but sometimes called the giant's footstep. And you can see the shape of it if you go there. I tell you the truth, it's just the shape of a foot. You can even see the 5 toes. And the giant, just when he got up, I mean, he was so upset, because there were the Trows just running about and laughing at him. So he decided that if he couldn't take the Trows to Norway, then he would go to Norway himself. And that's what he did. And as far as I know, he's still somewhere deep in a fjord in Norway, having a nice, peaceful time. And the Trows, they're still on Shetland. If you're up there, you might hear them in the night, singing and dancing, playing their fiddles. So that is the end of the Tuck Shop Tales, and I am so glad you've come along today. And I think this is the last one of the Tuck Shop series, but I know that the Storytime Centre will have lots of amazing and wonderful things for you throughout July and August. So please do keep an eye on the website and see what treats are in store for you during the summer months. And so all the best. And goodbye.